Hey everyone, welcome to Reddit at Work, where we dive into the real workplace stories that had people reaching for the popcorn or hiding behind their monitors. My boss and I had a secret affair until his wife showed up at the office. I was 27, ambitious, and eager to prove myself at a mid-sized marketing firm in the heart of the city. He was 42, charismatic, and the kind of leader who commanded respect without ever raising his voice. His name was Daniel, and he was my boss. I remember the first time I noticed him not as my superior, but as a man. It was during a late-night brainstorming session. The office was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels intimate when you're the only two people left. We were sitting across from each other at the conference table, surrounded by empty coffee cups and scattered sticky notes. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his dark, slightly graying hair, and smiled at something I said. It wasn't a professional smile. It was warm, genuine, and it made my stomach flip in a way I hadn't felt in years. At first, I told myself it was just a crush, harmless. Everyone has them, right? But then the late nights became more frequent. The emails turned into texts. The texts turned into flirty banter, and before I knew it, we were crossing lines I never thought I'd cross. The romance began slowly, like a spark that refused to die. It started with lingering glances during meetings, casual touches that lasted a second too long, and inside jokes that only we understood. He made me feel seen in a way no one else did. He praised my work, encouraged my ideas, and made me feel like I was the most important person in the room. It was intoxicating, but there were red flags, so many red flags. The fact that he was married, for one. He wore his wedding ring, but he never talked about his wife. When I asked, he'd brush it off with a vague comment or change the subject. I told myself it didn't matter, that their marriage was probably over in all but name, that what we had was different, special. For a while, it was. At its peak, our relationship was electric. We were careful, of course. We never showed affection at work, never left the office together, and never talked about us in front of colleagues. But behind closed doors, it was a different story. We'd meet at discreet hotels, steal kisses in empty stairwells, and spend hours talking about everything and nothing. He made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. But balancing our professional and personal lives was harder than I expected. There were times when I'd catch him in a meeting, stern and authoritative, and it was hard to reconcile that man with the one who whispered sweet nothings in my ear the night before. And then there were the lies, so many lies, to our coworkers, to his wife, and even to ourselves. I don't know if anyone suspected anything. If they did, they never said anything. But looking back, I can see the signs. The way some of my co-workers would avoid eye contact with me. The way Daniel's assistant always seemed to be watching us. The way the office gossip seemed to die down whenever we walked into a room. The turning point came on a Tuesday. I remember because it was the day of our big client presentation. I'd spent weeks preparing for it, and I was nervous. Daniel had promised to meet me in the conference room early to go over the final details. But when I got there, he wasn't alone. His wife was with him. I'd never met her before, but I knew it was her the moment I walked in. She was beautiful, tall, elegant, and impeccably dressed. She had the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you're the most important person in the room, and she was standing next to Daniel, her hand resting lightly on his arm, smiling at me like she knew everything. "You must be Emily," she said, her voice smooth and polite. "Daniel's told me so much about you." I froze. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it. I glanced at Daniel, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at the floor, his jaw clenched, looking like a man who'd just been caught in a trap. The presentation was a blur. I don't remember what I said or how it went. All I remember is the way Daniel's wife watched me the entire time, her expression unreadable, and the way Daniel avoided me for the rest of the day. That night, I got a text from him. "We need to talk." We met at a quiet bar downtown, far away from the office. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept in days. He told me his wife had found out about us. She'd seen a text on his phone, something flirty I'd sent without thinking. She'd confronted him, and he'd confessed everything. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low and strained. "I never meant for this to happen." I wanted to be angry. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him he'd ruined everything. But all I felt was numb. The fallout was worse than I could have imagined. Daniel's wife showed up at the office again the next day, this time with HR in tow. She demanded an investigation, and suddenly everyone knew. The whispers followed me everywhere I went. My coworkers, who had once been friendly, now avoided me like I had the plague. Even the ones who had always been kind to me couldn't hide their judgment. Daniel was put on administrative leave while HR conducted their investigation. I was questioned, too, but there wasn't much to say. The truth was out, and there was no going back. In the end, Daniel resigned. He said it was to protect his marriage, but I think it was also to protect himself. He left the company quietly, without so much as a goodbye. I stayed, but it wasn't the same. The office felt like a minefield, every conversation laced with tension. I tried to focus on my work, but it was hard when everyone was watching me, waiting for me to slip up. The experience changed me in ways I'm still trying to understand. It made me question everything, my judgment, my values, even my self-worth. I'd always thought of myself as a strong, independent woman, but the affair made me realize how easily I could be swayed by attention and validation. It also changed how I view workplace romances. I used to think they were exciting, even glamorous. Now, I see them for what they are: complicated, messy, and often destructive. The power dynamics, the secrecy, the potential for betrayal, it's a recipe for disaster. If I could go back, I'd do everything differently. I'd walk away the moment I felt that first spark of attraction. I'd remind myself that no amount of excitement is worth the pain and humiliation that followed. But I can't go back. All I can do is move forward. I've since left that job and started over at a new company, where no one knows my past. It's been a fresh start, but the scars are still there. They remind me of the lessons I've learned, the mistakes I've made, and the person I never want to be again. If there's one piece of advice I'd give to someone considering a workplace romance, it's this: don't. It's not worth the risk. No matter how special it feels in the moment, the consequences are rarely worth it. Love shouldn't come at the cost of your dignity, your career, or your peace of mind. As for Daniel, I haven't spoken to him since that night at the bar. I heard through the grapevine that he and his wife are still together, trying to work things out. I don't know if they'll make it, but I hope they do, for his sake, and for hers. As for me, I'm still picking up the pieces. It's a slow process, but I'm getting there, one day at a time. We were the office power couple until the layoffs tore us apart. I was new to the company, fresh out of grad school and eager to prove myself in the marketing department. He was a senior analyst, the kind of guy who seemed to have it all together: sharp suits, sharper wit, and a reputation for turning around failing projects. His name was Daniel, and from the moment he smiled at me across the break room, I was hooked. It wasn't just his looks, though he was undeniably handsome. It was the way he carried himself, like he knew exactly who he was and where he was going. I wanted to be near that confidence, to borrow a little of it for myself. The connection was instant, but the romance was a slow burn. We started with casual conversations, the kind of small talk that feels anything but small when you're trying to impress someone. He'd ask about my weekend plans, and I'd laugh a little too hard at his jokes. Then came the late nights working on the same projects, the shared glances during meetings, and the texts that started with work-related questions and ended with flirty banter. It was thrilling, the kind of excitement that makes you feel like you're living in a movie, and for a while, it was perfect. What made Daniel stand out to me wasn't just his charm or his ambition, it was the way he saw me. In a workplace where I often felt like just another cog in the machine, he made me feel like I mattered. He'd compliment my ideas in meetings, ask for my opinion on his projects, and always seemed to know when I needed a pick-me-up. It was intoxicating, being noticed by someone so respected and admired. But looking back, there were red flags I chose to ignore. The way he'd sometimes disappear for days, citing work stress, or the way he'd subtly put down other colleagues to make himself look better. I told myself it was just his competitive nature, that it was part of what made him so successful. I didn't want to see the cracks in the facade. At its peak, our relationship was electric. We were the office power couple, though we kept things discreet. There were no public displays of affection, no overt flirting in front of colleagues, but there was an undeniable chemistry that people picked up on. We'd exchange knowing smiles during presentations, finish each other's sentences in brainstorming sessions, and sometimes sneak away for lunch dates at a cafe down the street. It felt like we were in on a secret, like we had this incredible connection that no one else could touch. Balancing our professional and personal lives wasn't easy, but we made it work. Or so I thought. The turning point came when the company announced layoffs. It was a brutal round of cuts, the kind that left everyone on edge. Rumors swirled about who would be let go, and the atmosphere in the office turned toxic. Daniel and I tried to support each other, but the stress started to wear on us. He became distant, preoccupied with saving his own skin. I told myself it was just the pressure, that he'd bounce back once things settled down. But then the rumors started about him cozying up to the higher-ups, about him throwing colleagues under the bus to secure his position. I didn't want to believe it, but the signs were hard to ignore. The most painful moment came during a team meeting. Our boss was outlining the new structure post-layoffs, and Daniel's name was announced as the new head of the department. I felt a surge of pride for him, but it was quickly overshadowed by the looks of resentment from our colleagues. Later, I overheard a conversation that shattered me. Daniel had been feeding information to the higher-ups, positioning himself as the savior of the department. And in the process, he'd thrown me under the bus, downplaying my contributions to make himself look better. I confronted him that night, and the argument that followed was brutal. He accused me of being naive, of not understanding how the game was played. I accused him of betraying me, of putting his career above everything else. It was the end of us. The fallout was messy. The office gossip was relentless, and I found myself isolated from colleagues who saw me as collateral damage in Daniel's rise to power. HR got involved after a particularly heated exchange between us in the break room, and I was warned to keep things professional. It was humiliating, walking past his office every day, knowing what we'd had and what we'd lost. I threw myself into my work, determined to prove that I didn't need him to succeed. But the scars were there, and they took a long time to heal. The experience changed me in ways I'm still unpacking. It made me more cautious, more aware of the blurred lines between personal and professional relationships. I learned that love in the workplace can be a double-edged sword. It can lift you up, but it can also tear you down. If I could go back, I'd do things differently. I'd set clearer boundaries, ask harder questions, and maybe walk away before things got too complicated. But I also wouldn't trade the experience, painful as it was. It taught me about resilience, about the importance of staying true to myself, even when the world feels like it's falling apart. To anyone considering a workplace romance, my advice is this: tread carefully. Be honest with yourself about what you're getting into, and don't ignore the red flags. Love can be a beautiful thing, but it's not worth sacrificing your self-respect or your career. And if things do go south, remember that you're stronger than you think. You'll survive the heartbreak, the gossip, and the awkward encounters in the break room. And one day, you'll look back and realize that you've grown from the experience, scars and all. Our workplace wedding was perfect until I caught him with the best man. A glance across the office, a shared laugh during a team meeting, a lingering moment by the coffee machine. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to fall for a coworker. I'd always been the rule follower, the one who rolled her eyes at office gossip and steered clear of drama. But then, there was Daniel. Daniel was the kind of person who could light up a room without even trying. He had this magnetic energy, a way of making everyone feel seen and heard. When he walked into a meeting, it was like the air shifted, and suddenly, the room was alive. I remember the first time we really talked. It was after a long, grueling presentation that had left the entire team drained. I was sitting at my desk, staring blankly at my computer screen, when he appeared beside me, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You looked like you needed this," he said, handing me one with a smile that made my stomach flip. I thanked him, and we started talking about work, about life, about everything and nothing. It was easy with him, effortless in a way that felt rare. Over the next few weeks, we found ourselves gravitating toward each other more and more. We'd linger after meetings, exchange playful emails, and steal moments in the break room. It was a slow burn, but the chemistry was undeniable. Looking back, there were probably red flags. He had a reputation for being a bit of a charmer, and I'd heard whispers about his past relationships, but I dismissed them as office gossip. After all, people loved to talk, and Daniel was an easy target. He was confident, successful, and undeniably attractive. Of course, people would speculate. As our connection deepened, we decided to keep things quiet. It wasn't that we were ashamed, we just wanted to protect what we had. The office could be a fishbowl, and neither of us wanted to be the subject of water cooler chatter. So, we became experts at secrecy. We'd exchange knowing glances during meetings, sneak out for lunch dates, and steal kisses in empty conference rooms. It was thrilling, intoxicating even. At its peak, our relationship was everything I'd ever wanted. Daniel was attentive, romantic, and endlessly supportive. He'd leave little notes on my desk, surprise me with my favorite snacks, and text me sweet messages throughout the day. We were a team, both at work and in life. I felt like I'd found my person, and for a while, it seemed like nothing could tear us apart. But then, things started to change. It was subtle at first, a missed text here, a cancelled plan there. I told myself he was just busy, that work was stressful for both of us. But as the weeks went on, the distance between us grew. He became more secretive, more guarded. I'd catch him whispering on the phone or quickly closing his laptop when I walked into the room. I tried to brush it off, but the nagging feeling in the back of my mind wouldn't go away. The turning point came at our wedding. Yes, our wedding. After 2 years of dating, Daniel proposed, and I said yes without hesitation. We decided to keep the ceremony small and intimate, inviting only close friends and family. It was perfect, or so I thought. The day started off beautifully. I woke up feeling like the luckiest woman in the world, surrounded by my bridesmaids as we got ready. Daniel had chosen his best friend, Mark, as his best man. Mark was also a coworker, someone we'd both known for years. He was charming and funny, the life of the party, and I'd always thought of him as a good friend. But as the day went on, I started to notice something was off. Daniel seemed distant, almost distracted. He'd barely looked at me during the ceremony, and at the reception, he spent more time talking to Mark than to me. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just wedding jitters, but the unease in my gut only grew. I'd gone upstairs to our hotel suite to grab my shawl, and as I approached the door, I heard voices. At first, I thought it was just the TV, but as I got closer, I realized it was Daniel and Mark. Their voices were low, urgent, and as I pushed the door open, I froze. There they were, locked in an embrace that left no room for misunderstanding. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, as they pulled apart and turned to face me. The look on Daniel's face, a mix of guilt and panic, told me everything I needed to know. Mark looked equally stunned, his face pale as he stammered out an apology. I don't remember much of what happened next. It's all a blur of tears, shouting, and the crushing weight of betrayal. I left the hotel that night, still in my wedding dress, and drove to my sister's house. She held me as I sobbed, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The fallout was brutal. The next day, I called HR and reported the incident. I knew it would blow up, but I didn't care. The office was a whirlwind of gossip and speculation, and I found myself at the center of it all. Daniel and Mark were both reprimanded, and eventually, they both left the company. But the damage was done. For months, I struggled to focus at work. Every corner of the office reminded me of Daniel, of the life we'd built together and the future we'd planned. I felt like a shell of myself, going through the motions but unable to truly move on. It took time, but eventually, I began to heal. I threw myself into my work, reconnected with old friends, and started therapy. Slowly but surely, I began to rebuild my life. The experience changed me in ways I'm still trying to understand. It made me more cautious, more guarded, but also more resilient. I learned that love, no matter how perfect it seems, can be fragile. And I learned that sometimes, the people you trust the most are the ones who can hurt you the deepest. If I could go back, I'm not sure what I'd do differently. Maybe I'd listen to the whispers, pay more attention to the red flags. Or maybe I'd still choose to love, because despite everything, I don't regret the joy we shared. To anyone considering a workplace romance, my advice is simple. Be careful. Love is a beautiful thing, but it's also complicated, especially when your career is on the line. Take your time, trust your instincts, and always protect your heart. As for me, I'm still healing, still learning, but I know I'll be okay, because if there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that I'm stronger than I ever thought possible. And that's a lesson I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. If you enjoy these corporate cautionary tales, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss our weekly dose of workplace drama. Drop a comment letting us know which story hits closest to home. I dated my assistant, and it destroyed my career. I was a mid-level manager at a thriving marketing firm, overseeing a team of 12. My days were filled with meetings, deadlines, and the occasional fire to put out. Life was busy, predictable, and, if I'm being honest, a little monotonous. That was until she walked into the office. Her name was Claire. She was hired as my new assistant, fresh out of college, eager to prove herself. From the moment she introduced herself, there was something about her, a spark, a magnetic energy that I couldn't ignore. She had this way of lighting up a room, her laughter infectious, her confidence striking. She wasn't just smart, she was sharp, quick-witted, and unafraid to challenge me in meetings. I admired that. Maybe a little too much. At first, our interactions were strictly professional. She'd bring me coffee, organize my schedule, and help me prepare for presentations. But over time, the lines began to blur. We'd linger in my office after meetings, chatting about everything from work to our personal lives. She'd share stories about her college days, and I'd tell her about my early career struggles. There was an ease between us, a connection that felt natural, too natural. Looking back, there were red flags, tiny, flickering warnings that I chose to ignore. The way she'd laugh a little too hard at my jokes, the way her hand would brush against mine when she handed me a document. And then there were the late nights. She'd stay after hours to help me with projects, and I'd convince myself it was because she was dedicated to her job. But deep down, I knew there was more to it. I just didn't want to admit it. The first time we crossed the line, it was after a particularly grueling week. We'd been working late on a client pitch, and by the time we finished, the office was empty. I offered to walk her to her car, and as we stood in the dimly lit parking garage, something shifted. The air between us felt charged, electric. I don't remember who made the first move, but suddenly, we were kissing. It was reckless, impulsive, and undeniably thrilling. In that moment, I didn't care about the consequences. All I cared about was her. For a while, it was perfect. We kept our relationship a secret, which only added to the excitement. Sneaking glances during meetings, stealing kisses in empty conference rooms, it felt like we were living in our own little world. At work, we were the picture of professionalism, but behind closed doors, we were something else entirely. I told myself we had it under control, that we could keep our personal and professional lives separate. I was wrong. The cracks started to show a few months in. Claire began to resent the secrecy. She wanted more time, more attention, more acknowledgement. I tried to reassure her, but the truth was, I was terrified of what would happen if anyone found out. I had worked too hard to risk my career over a relationship, but the more I pulled away, the more she pushed. She started showing up at my desk unannounced, texting me during meetings, and making thinly veiled comments in front of our colleagues. It was subtle at first, but over time, it became impossible to ignore. The turning point came during a team retreat. We were all staying at a resort, and after a long day of meetings, everyone gathered in the hotel bar. Claire had been drinking, and as the night wore on, she became increasingly flirtatious. At first, I tried to play it off, laughing nervously and deflecting her advances. But then she leaned in and whispered something in my ear, something that made it clear our secret was no longer safe. I panicked. I told her we needed to talk and pulled her aside, but she was too upset to listen. The argument escalated, and before I knew it, we were shouting at each other in the middle of the bar. Everyone was watching. The fallout was immediate. By the next morning, rumors were swirling. My boss called me into his office and demanded to know what was going on. I tried to downplay it, but the damage was done. Claire was called in next, and when she emerged, her eyes were red and puffy. She wouldn't even look at me. A few days later, HR launched an investigation. They interviewed everyone on the team, dissecting our relationship like it was some kind of scandal. And in a way, it was. The investigation dragged on for weeks, and the tension in the office was unbearable. Claire and I barely spoke, and when we did, it was strained and awkward. Our colleagues treated us differently. Some with pity, others with thinly veiled judgment. I felt like I was under a microscope, every move scrutinized, every decision questioned. It was exhausting. In the end, the company decided to transfer Claire to another department. On paper, it was framed as a promotion, but we both knew the truth. She was being moved to avoid a lawsuit. As for me, I was given a formal warning and told to reassess my priorities. The message was clear. I was on thin ice. The aftermath was brutal. Claire and I tried to make it work for a while, but the trust was gone. We were both angry and resentful, and eventually, we called it quits. At work, things never went back to normal. My team no longer respected me, and my superiors viewed me as a liability. Projects I'd worked on for years were handed off to someone else, and I was passed over for a promotion I'd been gunning for. It felt like my career was unraveling before my eyes. I wish I could say I handled it with grace, but the truth is, I didn't. I became bitter and withdrawn, lashing out at anyone who tried to help me. I started looking for a new job, but my reputation followed me. It took months before I finally landed something, and even then, it was a step down from where I'd been. The experience changed me in ways I'm still trying to understand. It made me question my judgment, my values, and my ability to lead. It also made me realize how dangerous it can be to mix business with pleasure. Workplace romances might seem exciting in the moment, but they come with risks that can have lasting consequences. If I could go back, I'd do things differently. I'd set boundaries from the start, and if I felt myself crossing them, I'd walk away. I'd remember that no matter how strong the connection, some lines aren't meant to be crossed. And most importantly, I'd remind myself that the thrill of a secret romance isn't worth the cost of my career or my self-respect. To anyone considering a workplace romance, my advice is simple. Don't. Or if you must, tread carefully. Be honest with yourself about the risks, and don't ignore the red flags. Because once the damage is done, there's no going back. Trust me, I know.